This episode is sponsored by Dr. Chrono by EverHealth, the #1 mobile all-in-one EHR. Built specifically for medical practices, Dr. Chrono includes an integrated feature that powers a seamless payments acceptance experience. Dr. Chrono Payments offers multiple ways for patients to pay as well as insurance credit card processing. As a Dr. Chrono customer, you can easily activate our fully integrated payment solution that will streamline your cash flow and help you get paid anytime from anywhere. Deliver the best patient experience with a fast and easy way to collect payments. Visit drchrono.com/payments. That's drchrono.com/payments to learn more about Dr. Chrono today. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story Podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
Direct primary care is redefining healthcare. It is allowing people to get accessible, affordable, and quality healthcare brought to them in a completely revolutionized way. I am Dr. Kelsey Walker with the Gold Standard Health in DeSoto, Texas, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Kelsey Walker grew up in Garland, Texas. She completed her bachelor's degree at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. She then obtained her Doctor of Medicine degree and completed her family medicine residency at Texas Tech Health Sciences Center in Lubbock, Texas. After her training, she moved back to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, where she worked in outpatient family medicine before founding the Gold Standard Health PLLC. Dr. Walker is board certified in family medicine and uses lifestyle medicine to focus on preventative and holistic wellness. She particularly enjoys helping patients achieve their best overall health through personalized wellness plans. Dr. Walker is a devoted Christian, wife, and mother to 3 wonderful kids. Most of her time outside of work is dedicated to serving her church and community, chauffeuring her kids, kissing boo-boos, and cooking healthy meals for her family. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Walker.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
That it is. When you signed up for the interview, you had over 20 patients, and it's so exciting. Congratulations on having people who are finding out the value of your care and who are investing in your direct primary care delivery, because you are focusing on the person. As we know so well in this movement, your journey is very different than the traditional 4 years of undergrad and then 4 years of medical school and then residency. You were on an accelerated program track, which I love. And I love highlighting unique nuances about people's backgrounds like that. Dr. Jennifer Allen was a person who was a nurse practitioner before she was a doctor. Dr. Laura Kenny went into an accelerated program. So tell us about your journey even into medicine.
Yeah, so Texas Tech, land of the Red Raiders, and it was such a fortunate blessing. Whenever I went to medical school, it was a very different kind of situation. I was already pregnant with my first daughter whenever I was interviewing. It was very early in the pregnancy, so I was hiding it. I didn't know, could I show the belly? Was that going to be accepted or anything like that? And so I was doing my interviews, and Texas Tech, it was like a beacon of light. My tour guide happened to be a medical student who was very pregnant, and she could not hide that fact. And so, of course, you ask those little questions without saying too much about how she felt about that medical school. And she was like, no, they are completely supportive. We have a ton of kind of non-traditional, I wasn't much older, but non-traditional students who have families and are married. And it just was a great environment. And so I was like, I must go here. And then they were like, oh, by the way, do you really like primary care? And I was like, yeah, I do. That's why I went into medicine. I think it's the first kind of exposure to medicine whenever people first get there, because who do you remember? Your pediatrician or your family doctor or whoever. And so I was like, that's what I really wanted to be. I wanted to be that great family doctor who you could just go to and call on. And they said, hey, by the way, you can do it in 3 years. You do have to say goodbye to most of your vacation time and your downtime, but the program is geared to getting primary care who are really well trained out into, it's supposed to be for rural areas. And so I did that. You actually take your third year in clinicals and actually put them on top of your didactics into your second year. And then you finish up the rest of your clinicals in your third year. You apply and interview for both the medical school and the residency program at the same time. And so, with a growing family and a husband, it was really nice not to have to go through that whole process of I might have a residency program somewhere else, I might not. And so you just got to feed straight into that residency program. But I loved that program because it was full scope family medicine. In the hospitals, we took care of our own patient census. We worked 2 different hospitals. You worked in the ER. At the time I started, we had no ER residents. So we were unopposed going into things. You managed your own OBs. And so you got nursing home, clinic, everything. And so I came out just feeling really strong in my family medicine skills.
What an amazing journey. I just think about how, yes, it is great. Like you didn't have to really think about where you would go to residency, but also the fact that you grew up in Texas. And when you're having a family, I'm assuming that there is family close to you, because I think that makes a difference in terms of where people choose to practice or open their DPCs. Is what is the social support around you, including family. So I think that's amazing that one, it was available to you in the state that you were, born and raised in. And then 2, that you were able to get such a strong background in regards to being a doctor, the skills, you're very big on whole person health. And so it is very cool to know that's where your training was rooted in. You took care of everybody. And they were not just like who showed up in your residency census that day. Because that's for those listeners who are not aware of unopposed versus opposed programs. It is a very real thing. If you're choosing residencies and you don't have the gift that Dr. Walker had, ability to look at what is the level of training that you're going to get exposed to, because you're in an unopposed, meaning you're the only residency in the hospital, taking care of the primary care patients, OB, ICU, ER, all of those things, versus an opposed program where there are usually other residency programs in the hospital, different specialties. Just going back to, you were pregnant already when you were taking this tour and the tour guide was very pregnant. How did you get through medical school? Because it's one thing to be a mom and a business owner, but going through the first 2 years of medical school, even if you're, and especially because you're on an accelerated track, that's freaking hard, man. So how did you do that and balance having a newborn as well as becoming a doctor?
Yes, I am big in my faith. So first and foremost, God, because there was just times whenever 1 + 1 = 10. And I just had to take it and say, thank you, Jesus, for getting me through that time. But also, a village was created very quickly. So my study group, I literally would just straight up ask them, are you okay if I have a baby with me, and that they might coo and they might cry and I might have to breastfeed, but we're going to get through this renal chapter together. And they were like, no problem. And they were happy to. We did a lot of studying at my house and I would just host, and I was like, I can cook. I will be the mama to everyone in this group, but I just need y'all to teach me this stuff and make sure that I am ready for these tests. And then, of course, cannot do it without my husband. He was amazing. There was some times that I would get jealous whenever my daughter would choose him over me because she spent most of her time with him. And I had to just realize that was okay. But it was a sacrifice for a season, and that's what got me through. A lot of time management. You learn how to make hours appear in the day. So if you are a medical student or a resident and you're like, I'm trying to figure out how to do family planning, I go, sometimes it's just literally knowing what every hour of your day is going to look like. And then just being also flexible in that. So it's called like flexible rigidity, where I would be up sometimes at 2 a.m. with a crying, colicky baby. So I would have my phone out and I would be going through flashcards at that time because I was like, if we're both going to be up right now, I might as well be getting studying in, because then I knew I had to get my sleep at some point to be productive in my day. And so I was like, I'm not going to get my sleep from 2 to 5. So that means I'm probably going to have to take a nap from noon until about 3, but that's okay because I still got my 3 hours of studying in. So I was very rigid that I needed my 3 hours of studying after my lectures or at some point in that 24 hours. I just had to be flexible of when that could be done.
I think that's beautiful. And I know you mentioned medical students and residents, but man, that is so perfect for the DPC doctor who's already planning their journey or who's in the first like 1 to 3 years of their DPC journey. You're living it yourself, but I think it's that training that you put yourself through that I'm sure has made you resilient in choosing to do DPC over other forms of insurance-based medicine. So let's go now into your experience taking care of all of these people when they're not pregnant, then they get pregnant and their kid and older people and all the things that come with family medicine, especially doing the procedures, all the things. What was it in your residency that you loved and what did you not love that pushed you to look elsewhere to practice medicine?
Yes, in my residency, I won't lie. I loved the continuity care. I loved the time. You also, because it's a training program, I think that there's a little bit more time buffered into the schedule because they know I have to go talk with the attending and then the attending has to come back and talk. And so there's a little bit different environment with that I loved. And you still got to shadow with the dietitian who would come around and talk about the diabetes training, and you got to shadow with the lactation consultants. And so I loved being able to be a part of that for my patients and then also hear what they were listening to. And I was like, this is awesome. Then I got out of training and I actually had a big girl job, is what I like to call it. And I was working for a big system and it was a lot different. I think residency gave me a taste of what it can be on a busy day whenever you're seeing 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon. But it's in and out. Let's get them in and out. Let's hit all of these metrics. Let's try and check all of the boxes. And oh, by the way, you're supposed to be writing all these justifications in your notes so that we can even be paid pennies to see these patients. And I realized I was like, this isn't what I signed up for. Because in the 5 minutes at that point that I had with the patient, I was like, I can't talk about nutrition. I definitely can't talk about lactation. And then of course, they're yelling at me that you don't get paid for lactation, so stop talking about it. And the final straw was that they were saying, hey, you need to just, at an acute visit for people with Medicare wellness, just do it together. So in that 10-minute slot, just do both. Why is that so hard? Because we need to make sure that we're hitting those metrics. So you should just do that. And in that same meeting, they told us we were getting paid less. And in that same meeting, they said, you're not being effective. You're in your chart after hours. And so why aren't you effective? And I literally was just like, this can't be the medicine. This can't be the life that we sacrificed our 20s for to come out. And then my patients aren't happy with it because the care gets real thinned out and watery. And I'm not happy with it. I was like, there has to be another way.
It's interesting because at the DPC Summit, where you and I were both at just a few weeks ago, I was asking medical students and residents this question: how did you find out about DPC? And one of them said something very similar. The feeling of this can't be how it is. That's what one of the residents said to me. And I'm like, you guys way smarter than me because I did not even think about this option of DPC until an orthopedic surgeon told me. And so kudos for just calling your life out and just saying, hey, this is not okay. And it's crazy too, because as you're talking, I think about like different listeners who are listening. Medical students are like, really? That's how it's like? The people who are in fee for service, a lot of them are like, yeah, that's exactly it. And then the people who are in DPC, like you and I, are like, peace out, man, we're done with that. So it's so crazy how, and I'm so sorry, I just yelled in people's ears, but it's so crazy how your noticing of the devaluement and devaluing the patient-doctor relationship, not because of your doing, but because of the system that you worked in, but your noticing of that evokes so much emotion in different types of people, no matter where they are in their DPC journey. So let's go on there. In terms of you were in a fee-for-service model, you know how that life is. Thinking about Dr. Michelle Cook's article, she was calling it like, how bad does it have to be for us to make change? So when you were in this spot of, oh, no, I am not going to be doing this any longer, when did you learn about DPC on this portion of your journey?
Yes, I'm going to back up a little bit just because it's on my heart to tell people that at first I thought I was broken. Literally, people were looking at me. They're like, you look more stressed and worn down than you did with 3 kids in residency. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, you don't look good. Like, you don't act right. And I thought, I was like, how did I get through, like I said, medical school with a 4-week-old? I started anatomy lab with a 4-week-old. I had a son in 3rd year and during all the clinical crazy stuff. And then I had my daughter in my 3rd year of residency, but it ended up being like preterm labor and all of these other crazy things. And yet somehow I came out of that still looking okay. But just 2 years, two years of fee for service, I looked worn down. And that's whenever I was like, maybe I'm not keeping up. So I did all the EPIC courses and I did all of the EMR trainings to try and be more efficient. And I did all the workshops to make it seem like you're spending more time with your patients versus just spending more time with your patients. And that's whenever I literally just took some time off. I did take some vacation time. I had a week off and I said, we're not going on vacation, honey. I just need a week just to sit at the house because I was like, I'm at a place that either it's continue this and I don't know how long I'll sustain before full burnout and for to be not to shy around it, full burnout ends in suicide. And I was like, that is one path, literally life or death, or we figure something else out. Whether it's I become a real estate agent, like I was literally looking at every single option. Do I go into pharmaceutical consults? What can I do? And I had actually met another DPC owner whenever he was first starting back in like medical school. And I remembered that he had mentioned this weird model. And then in residency, we had the AFP has a little like snippet on DPC. And so that was at one of the conferences. I saw it. And then again, and I'm not trying to be a broken record, but God just put it back on my mind. And every single one of those conversations like came back. And I was like, wait, there was something about direct primary care in there somewhere. And so I went back into my email and I found those little conversations and little pieces and I started Googling and I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not broken. There's a whole movement of people who felt what I felt, who understood that this is not sustainable and that there was another way. And I was like, okay. And so I literally just was like, I'm going to do this because it fits so well with my personality. I was like, 60-minute appointments. Some people would be like, oh my God. I know some doctors would have been like, no, I don't want to sit with 60 minutes with a patient at all. And I was like, I love it. I love being able to sit, relax. A lot of times am sipping my coffee while they're talking and discussing what's going on with them. And I'm just taking in what they're saying because my biggest joke is I was like, even House gets 45 minutes to solve the problem on the TV show. I was like, I don't know what doctor is supposed to figure it out in 5 minutes, but I can't. And this allows my brain to work and process, and my plans are much easier. They're so more cohesive, and my patients can understand them, and I have time to break it down. And people just leave. People don't come back with questions. They're like, no, you explained everything. I understand what is happening, what we're doing, and where we're headed after this. It is so important that people just take time to reflect anytime that there's a voice in your head, especially a negative one, but even could be positive ones, and just, can you support that evidence? Can you go back through your life and is that supported? And to be honest with you, you're looking at it and it's like, okay, so this voice is telling me I'm such a bad doctor. I can't keep up. I am not able to assimilate like I'm supposed to into this supposedly good system. If it's me as the problem, then how did I get here? Like, how did I even, and I'll touch a little bit, but I was like, I grew up and I was homeless for a while and we didn't have food security and I would come home and there wasn't electricity on. So, how did I go from that to a doctor if it wasn't that I could learn and I could assimilate and I can be efficient and I can do what everyone's asking me to? I already had 3 kids and a husband during medical school and residency. So if you look back, and I was like, if I have gotten this far, then how did I get here? Yet I'm the problem. It did take that week for me to sit down and really chew through that. But I encourage anyone that if they're having negative thoughts, really go back and look at the evidence. What is it bringing forth? Now, sometimes it is. I have to look at myself, and there are some negative thoughts that are very much justified. And then I have to say, okay, I don't want to identify as that. So if I don't want to identify as a person who keeps their clothes on the bathroom floor and people are yelling at me, my husband, that, hey, you need to pick your clothes up, then I have to stop doing that, right? Because the evidence shows, yes, my scrub top is definitely on that bathroom floor. So yes, the evidence does show that maybe I do that. I need to change this. But that is my big advice for people to, and that gave me the power to get up and get going, but also that week off. I know it was just a week, but my kids were in daycare. My husband was at work. It really was just me alone. And I knew I had a purpose as well, though, for that week to rejuvenate, take a day to just sleep and wake up and then just figure out like, where do I go from here? And once I could fight against that negativity, I then just looked at all the positive and I pushed it forward. And I was like, oh, and then that gave me that second wind. It also made me look at work a lot different because whenever I stepped in that next week, I was like, I'm not the problem. This is, and it wasn't as draining.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you to Spruce Health for supporting the My DPC Story podcast. The ways we communicate have changed dramatically over the past decades, but technology and tools in healthcare have not kept pace. Patients want more access and digital convenience, as well as the ability to text their care teams. Care teams are inundated with more communication and rising expectations, but are still using tools and technology stuck in prior decades. Spruce Health created a solution for the tech-forward DPC practice by creating a communication product designed to serve both the patient and the doctor through intuitive HIPAA-compliant workflows, tagging, scheduled messages, and triage templates ready for use, whether you're on your phone or in the exam room. New users get 20% off for the first 12 months of a paid plan with code MARYAL20. That's MARYAL20. So check out Spruce Health today at sprucehealth.com or check out the link in the show notes.
And I think that's such amazing advice for people, especially if you have a lot going on around you, whether you have little kids, whether you have like kids involved in tons of things and you just need a moment to yourself. I absolutely am like all in that boat of like, earn those credit card points, go somewhere else with those credit cards and points in the future and like do your taxes over the weekend or figure out like the chaos that you are trying to control in your DPC. Go sit down and figure it out. But also I want to call out too that find people in your journey who are either around you in the same, space as you in terms of like planning, first 3 years of DPC, whatever it is that you connect with. This is where DPC already is an amazing community, but even within the community, you can find DPC doctors who are doing these things, thinking these thoughts, same as you, having the doubts, having the successes, and being a person who is a part of a group within this community can really help you in your entrepreneurial journey. When you said that you had heard about DPC from somebody even while you were in medical school. Just to note there, DPC Frontier, the DPC Alliance, there are resources for those listeners who, if you are in residency or in medical school and you're like, I wish someone could talk to us about DPC. One, yes, you can say to your program director or program, didactics coordinator, like, hey, I would love someone. You could also say, hey, Dr. Walker, could you please come talk to my residency, and have that lined up and literally hand on a silver plate to your program director. Dr. Walker is a direct primary care doctor, and I would like to learn more about that. You can even talk to your fellow residents and medical students and say, hey, I have 20 people who want to hear from Dr. Walker. Can we do this? Thanks. I'm all about how can we get the word out to those people who do not know about DPC yet. So when you learned about DPC and the seed had been planted and you were like, wow, it is not me. You sat there, you took time to reflect on your own achievements that you have made despite the things that you have been put through. How did you then transition to leaving fee-for-service?
Yes. So I am actually one of the few who I actually hired a coach. So I use Dr. Abby. She is a DSC. So she's a direct specialty care who also has multiple kids. And she did this. I knew that I needed a little bit more help. I knew that if I reached out to people, they were supportive, and that showed 100%. I would literally just call someone and they usually picked up themselves and we were both like, hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so. And I was like, can I sit and talk with you? They're like, yeah, sure. But I knew I needed it to be regimented because I'm the breadwinner of my family. And I was like, hey, I know I could probably figure it out. But one, I feel like I'm on a time limit. And two, I have a margin of error that I needed to tighten up. And so I invested in that service. That's amazing, right? Every week, someone's checking in, making sure I was on top of it, making sure I was doing what I needed to do, had beautiful checklists. I'm one of those people, check, I can get through stuff. But it also put deadlines because, as we all know, if we're busy with kids, sometimes if it doesn't have a deadline, it's not getting done at all. So I was just like, okay, my weekly meeting is on this date. So then I have to get all this stuff done by that date. And so that was great. And then also if I just slumped down, I had someone who was just always building me up. But the first thing I did was actually just meet with other direct primary cares. And I think that's invaluable. I would meet with them and see their place if they have the time. Most of us do, and we're happy to have people in our space and say hi. Just get on the schedule so that you can see what it looks like and how people have it. There's no right or wrong way to get things off the ground. And most people were even fine with sharing like their startup budget, their startup list, where they did certain things, where they did everything, how they did their marketing. So that was beautiful. And then I just literally sat down and made a timeline. And I said, hey, I have to have this thing up off the ground by this point. And so every night, pretty much after work, I would give 2 or 3 hours to the business. I knew it was temporary. So I was like, I know I'll get this time back at some point. And I was like, if I can do residency, I can do anything. So we're going to take the time and learn this business. And then the other thing is my DPC story. And I know I'm not just saying it because I'm on here right now, but my way to work and my way back from work was listening to podcasts. And my DPC story was pretty much on there every single day because it gave me that motivation to hear other people's stories. But a lot of times they would say something and I was like, oh, there's this resource, or, oh, that's how someone else did it. And it showed me other pathways that I could learn from and glean from. And that's how the gold standard kind of came to be. It was a lot of late nights and figuring it out, but we're here now. And it's crazy to think that I've, been doing this for over 6 months now.
And you are the gold standard. So let's talk about that. I think it's such an awesome name. I will totally tell the listeners, if you have not, go on to Dr. Walker's social media. She has gold gloves, people. The only DPC doctor I know who has gold gloves talking about colonoscopies. Oh my God, it is real. But tell us, how did you get your name, your brand? If you're not watching the YouTube, definitely check it out.
Yes. And on my website, in my blog post, I did talk about this, but I have this wonderful patient. And whenever she met me, she was like, I need help. And we would sit down and talk. And I think that a lot of patients, they just come to you wounded. And having a doctor who just sits with you, and actually, I met her in fee for service, but every single time I would see her name on my calendar, it made my day because I knew that she was just such a bright ray of sunshine. Not like she wanted help was her big thing, but she'd come in and she was like, "Oh, you're so beautiful, and I love you, Dr. Walker." And then one day she goes, "You're the gold standard." And she's, "I need to tell everybody that you're the gold standard of what a doctor should be, that you listen, that you take your time, and that you educate." And so every day after that, or every time she would see me after that, she would yell out, "You're the gold standard." And it just kept sitting there. And I go back and forth with names. I really wanted something short and quippy, like Mint, Dash, or Bravo, or something really like quick and easy to see. And the gold standard kept coming in, the gold standard. And I was just like, you know what? Why not? Why not literally claim it and say, let's change the benchmark for what medicine is? Because right now it is so low that we really need to just pull it up, and we need to put it to a place that this is the new normal, right? That you get to talk with your doctor, you get to sit down, that your doctor gets to take time with you, and that you get to be treated like a human. And I also get to be treated like a human. There's no machines in this world that can replace us as humans. Let's go back and raise up the standard so that we can have the gold standard in all of our life.
Now, let me ask you, because you had a coach when you were on your transition journey, and you had written that blog post about this patient saying this amazing thing to you before you even opened. So how did you plan strategically did you have by this date, I will for sure have a name, and by this date, I will open, and the name will come so much time before the clinic opening? How did you strategically get to name and then clinic opening?
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Have you tried an AI scribe in your clinic? Well, I've tried so many, and I can say Heidi Health is the best AI scribe I have come across thus far. With Heidi Health, I can create unlimited customizable templates for my notes to help me truly cut down on the time I'm spending charting. Template for pediatric well child check? Done. Template for weight loss management? Done. Some of my favorite things I've built into my AI template, beyond the general soap note, are having a list of actionables for our team to take after a patient visit, having the diagnoses listed, and creating an after-visit summary for our patients. Not only have I found Heidi Health to be the most helpful, customizable AI scribe so far, it's also more affordable than most out there. So try Heidi Health today and see how you can harness the power of an AI scribe for your practice. To get an entire month of Heidi Pro free, go to the homepage of mydpcstory.com and click on the Heidi Health ad.
Yes, I also read the Plum Health DPC book and things. I'm one of those people. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to know as much as possible before I do it. And one of the things where they were like, the hardest thing, but the biggest thing, if you just can get past it, is the name. Because once you have that, you can then open the LLC or whatever entity per your state. In Texas, it's what's called a professional limited liability company. So anyone with a professional license has to open that type of LLC. Whatever it is, after that, you have your LLC, your EIN, and then you can do banks, you can fill out forms, then you can apply for rent or leases or lines of credit, whatever you need. And so I was like, okay. So I did give myself a deadline. I think I gave myself 4 weeks. We, had the list, voted on them. I sent them out to family. I was like, what do you think about this name or this name? And we just kept going back to the gold standard. And one of the great things that my coach talked to me about was also, and this kind of feeds into how to get patients just a little bit, because I have a non-compete, so I couldn't solicit and I can't be as close to the clinic and all that stuff. I think those are slowly moving away. I think that they're going to get sneaky in that language. But so I started actually my social media presence, and it was just Dr. Kelsey Walker on Instagram and Facebook. And I had my patients follow me on those social medias just because I was like, I'll just post educational stuff. And so the planning actually started while I was still working, of course, and starting to get a following so that people knew who I was, and that in my area, people were starting to share my name so that once I launched my business once my contract was up, that it was like, oh, Kelsey Walker is the gold standard health. So that put them together. So I had a timeline almost for everything. And so it first started off with name, idea. And while I was still doing that, it was let me get a social media presence until I figure out the name. After that, I said, okay, by January of 2024, I need to have a name. My LLC needs to be formed. My EIN needs to be obtained, and everything needs to be ready because by March, I want to be open. And so that meant that you have to have all of those little check boxes done before I pushed forward. But it was great because whenever I step out, I already had known. So I was already preparing patients. I was like, hey, I am leaving at this point. You can Google me, is what I can say, that I'm still going to be practicing medicine. It's just not going to be here. And that's how I would leave them. But they all knew that they could follow me and message me on social media. So that helped a lot.
I really hope that also helps quell some people's fears who are planning DPC, but they haven't yet left their fee-for-service job. And whether a non-compete is in place, because there are rules with the nonprofits especially, or if a person doesn't have a non-compete, there's definitely different ways to get through. I'm not allowed to tell my patients where I'm going. How am I going to get through that? That is an excellent way to answer that, is find a social media presence. And Dr. Melissa Mandala, this is a while ago, but she said in her episode, there are contracts from employers that will say, we own your social media. And look for that in those contracts to make sure that while the non-compete stuff is being ironed out, that you are not owned in terms of exclusivity. Your social media is not owned. There are different things to look for specifically in those contracts. Now, to have a timeline with dates, and I will say that the clarity that you had in terms of this is when everything will be done, I can push the button forward, I can open, it's amazing. And I think that also takes some anxiety out of the process, because this is a process. You have your FAFSA application so that you have to fill it out and then you submit it. It's the same type of thing. Again, you called it out. You are a freaking doctor. You went to doctor school. You are a freaking smart person. These things, they were annoying as hell sometimes because you're like, God, it takes so long to get my CLIA waiver, whatever it is. Yes, but it is doable. When you were at this point of you had your name and you had your opening date scheduled in March, how did you do your logo and your brand colors?
Yeah. So I actually did everything myself, which is sometimes people look at me and they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, I just sat down on Canva, which is a very easy, you get a free trial period. So most of my stuff was done during that free trial period to get everything done. But I love the meaning behind certain things. So whenever you think of like growth, prosperity, health, and wealth, you think of green and gold. And so I wanted it to be elegant because I feel like you can't have the name the gold standard health and then you not produce and stand up behind that quality that you're promoting and promising. And so literally, if I could span across my whole office, it is green and gold because I want people to get enveloped in it. And that whenever they think of it, oh, that's definitely her. That's that office that has it. Like it is from the top to the bottom. The second I walk in, I am engulfed into a different world. But I also didn't want it to be, people laugh at me whenever I say this, but too medical because yeah, it's just people, you walk in and it's cold and it's sterile. And I feel like you lock up. And so I wanted my patients to come in and feel more at ease, feel like they're at home, still have a homey feel, but a sophisticated side of the homey feel. So yeah, I just played with Canva, found the codes, saved those codes, put them somewhere, take a picture because once it's off by a number, it is not the same color anymore at all, and then just play with it. I tell people, go out, send it out to people, see what they say, get feedback. And I think it took probably 15 logo designs before I just sat down, got down to 3. And then finally the last round, it was like, okay, this is how it's going to be. And it is just the initials, the TGS. I might be going through a logo redesign, so we'll see. So if y'all see something a little bit different coming out, I've been playing with that as a little upgrade for this next season of the Gold Standard Health.
And that's it. It's just, you're going to change it potentially in the future, period. There's no committee that needs to be approved by. It's just, it's your practice. You do with it what you want. And I think also one of the things that I loved about your logo is when it's embroidered on your scrubs, it's really gorgeous and it's very classy and it stands out. Yeah. And so that's something to think about too. If you wish to have your logo embroidered, like how does it look if it is embroidered? How many color threads does it require? Like because you can take your brand and put it into a monochrome thread count or whatever, but just things to think about if you're like, could I do this brand? Maybe, but you could also have the same logo in different forms, just like there's black and white pictures and there's color pictures, but it's the same picture. Also, I need to ask about these gloves again. Like legit, I was like, dude, she has gold gloves. I was like, have your patients called you out on, you have gold gloves?
For sure. So literally my patients will literally start like laughing hysterically. Also, my procedure tray is also gold. So it comes out and then I have the gold gloves. And so I'm doing like your shoulder injection completely decked out with the gold gloves. And I was like, that was one of a splurge, but it wasn't a big splurge. So I was on Amazon and I kept looking at the different gloves and I knew that I was like, I don't like this texture. I don't like these. If anyone's been in healthcare for long enough, you know which glove type you like the not too thick or the too thin. And I saw them and instead of being like $4 a box, they were like $10 a box. And I was just like, you know what? You have to sometimes put stuff in your space that just makes you smile. And so whenever I'm doing a procedure, I was like, it's totally worth the extra $6 that it was because whenever I put on the gloves, I'm like, yeah, these are my gloves and this is me. And I don't think that there's going to be any other doctor that they ever go to that has gold gloves on.
And I think that is so, it's part of that process also of like, yeah, I'm amazing and I can open up a clinic and be a doctor and be a mom and all the things. You get to do little treats like that. And if it's a little splurge and you can afford it and still put food on the table and still be present and still respect your boundaries, do it. It's your clinic. I love it. So as you were talking to your patients and you were saying like, hey, like you can follow me on social media and you can Google me. How did the onboarding of patients go starting from day one in March?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, business enthusiasts, ready to boost your entrepreneurial journey? Tune in to the Growth Gear Podcast with Tim Jordan, presented by Carbon 6. Tim dives into cutting-edge business growth strategies and new brand insights. Whether you're a startup founder or a seasoned exec, gain the tools to elevate your business. Subscribe to the Growth Gear with Tim Jordan on your favorite podcast platform. Shift into high gear. The Growth Gear is your guide to fast-paced business success.
Yes, I did do a pre-enrollment period. And so I just had, honestly, I have a Google Suite as my professional kind of like suite where it has like my email. And so I did the HIPAA compliant one. So I was like, hey, y'all just fill out this link. And it took all their information. And I just promised, hey, if you establish with me within the first 12 months, you get your enrollment fee waived. And I gathered all of their names through that. And of course, pushing it through the website and my social media, I got probably about 50 or 60 names onto that pre-enrollment. And so that first month I opened out and the first day I already had 4 new people to come in. So day 1 opened with 4 people ready to go, which is awesome and amazing, but also terrifying. And not everything went great. I will say that. The cool thing though, is that whenever people, especially if they've known you from before, they give you so much grace. And I was like, hey, this blood pressure machine is not working right now because, of course, it doesn't want to work the day that my patients come. I've tried it out 14 times, but why wouldn't you work today? And so I had a fancy electronic one. I switched over to the manual. They were like, that's fine. I had a glitch that I think that my EMR, like I couldn't get to the note to open and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? We're just going to do it manual. I'm just going to write my notes down. And it was like, that's okay. I do recommend anyone who's doing like onboarding and things like that, take time to just look at the process and fix whatever you just didn't like. And so I made it a goal that every single patient after that, the experience would be better, and the experience would be better, and the experience would be smoother, and the integration would be better, and templates would be formed. And so now that I'm a few months in, it's push a button, they're in. I push a button over here, everything's done. And I was like, hey, now it's not as much work. And so I tell that to people, if you're on your first week and you're like, how am I going to do this for 20, 30, 40 more people? I go, it gets so much easier. I don't think it matters what the EMR is, what your clinical management program is, or whatever. Even if you're just using Google Docs, you learn how to do it better. And as long as you just take that commitment, you'll get there and get it done.
I'm sure there's people in the audience that are saying like, I feel so seen and heard, because those moments where you're like, oh my God, what do I do? My stuff's not working. Or I forgot to bring the brooms for a pap smear, all of these things. People who've listened to the podcast will get that pap smear reference, but it's literally, that is normal. And literally it is so uncomfortable. And you feel sometimes every blood vessel is popping in your body and you're sweating bullets and you're like, oh, and you get through it just like you have. And you're like, my patients didn't even care. Like I've shared about how I could not find the kennel log. And my patient was so angry because I didn't have a video ready of my son, not because I couldn't find the kennel log and she had to come back later that afternoon. She literally was like, you don't have a video of your son? Why? And I was like, okay, cool. Remember, their perception of healthcare is very crappy coming into DPC. And so when they are like, your blood pressure cuff's not working, that's cool. Like, yeah, I'll check mine at home. What if I did that and send it to you? There's ways to adjust. And you do not have to worry about them not getting an appointment for 6 months. And that is so reassuring for both the patients as well as us as doctors. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you there, because when you're talking about how you are making these micro adjustments for your patients and the onboarding process happened, whether you liked it or not, it was happening. I did want to highlight that you have a physical space. Again, if you're watching the YouTube, you can see her beautiful window. She has the professional cuff and the table right there. But how did you even find your space? Because you're south of Dallas. Was it a difficult process or was it fairly easy?
No, it was difficult. I'm not going to lie. It was not fun. I think it's because we think, one, I will tell people that you don't need it to be so grandiose. I think that in my head, this is not the space that I envisioned. I envisioned being like in this standalone little cute bricked out front that you walk in and there's 4 or 5 exam rooms plus an executive office and things like that. One, those are expensive, very expensive. And one of my biggest goals was not to go completely broke trying to get this done. I was like, I refuse to take food off of my kids' table for this, because that's just poor planning in my head. So I was like, okay, I have to figure this out. So after looking at medical offices and also some of them just laughing in our faces because it's like, you're not getting this approved, you have no business, prior. I then started looking at different podcasts who were like, oh, we share a space or we sublet. And I was like, oh, okay. So I found actually another DSC. She's an endocrinologist, Dr. Van Dyke, and she was actually having a space open. I was actually going to go that way, decided something else just because of location and some other things, but it opened up my mind to go, wait, there's specialists who have wasted space. Let me go that route. And so now I tell people all the time, I go, call your cardiologist, call your psychiatrist, especially psychiatrist, your endocrinologist, a rheumatologist, whoever, because a lot of times they have these big offices and they have 1 or 2 rooms that are available that you can just bum off of them. You can share the overhead then. And sometimes they're even willing to share their personnel. You already have a vetted MA. You already have a front office staff. Like, it is so amazing. So I actually share with a psychiatrist. And so she has the office right next door. And then my office is actually inclusive. So it has like my actual executive desk where I sit, write my notes, talk and counsel my patients. And then right behind me is actually where I do my physical exam. And so I have my exam table, and then I have even like my baby scale and my supply closet with all of my medications, and it works. And I think that people love it. They're always like, your little tiny office. But I was like, it also just, it makes things simple because I don't have to go hunting for stuff. It's all right here. So then I can just turn around and I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's in one of these drawers. I haven't forgotten or lost the catalog yet. I just didn't have it ordered. And that was going to be another thing, is that I tell people are so used to waiting 3 or 4 months to get stuff done in the traditional thing. You don't have to buy it all at right now. I just told a patient, I was like, hey, my supplier will probably overnight this to me tomorrow. Can we just schedule it for 2 days from now just to make sure it comes in? Once I got it, it actually came in earlier. So I just texted her and I was like, hey, it's actually here. I'm not doing anything. Are you busy? And she was like, no. So we got the shot done. And now it's put up and I can use it for other patients. But um, I tell people, keep it simple, but also think outside of the box. There's probably a space or something that you can fit into that is not the traditional, and that's okay. If you want the traditional, go for it. But I don't think it's necessary to be successful and for your patients to love it.
I love that. And you highlighted the regular wait for a doctor appointment is really long in normal fee for service. And so we don't even say, hey, like the supplier part, I used to say that, but now I'm like, I know that if it's ordered by a certain time, I can get it by a certain date. And I tell them like a date that is like a day or two after in case there are any snafus. And I'm like, and they're all, you don't even you're not even surprised anymore when they're like, oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. You can get me in so fast. It's like, this is DPC, man. This is DPC. So you get your procedures done. They get the care, moving on. And you didn't necessarily need to invest in having that in stock for you to be able to do that procedure. So huge pro tip. So let me ask you now about the difference in care that you have been able to deliver to the patients who have joined your practice, even just within these first few months of your first year compared to your time in those 2 years in fee for service. How is it different now?
It's night and day different. I have a patient, I just did a launch party. So I had a whole bunch of people come out who have supported me and we just had fun and celebrated. I thought it was just time. I was like, we have to do something so that it's not just the monotonous. I need to go out and show people who we are. And that member actually took the stage and talked about, because she had followed me through. And so she was like, yeah, you were a good doctor, like great doctor before. And she was like, I didn't know you could get better until I followed you here. And she was like, oh, Dr. Walker has another level. And it is a totally different level. I love it. I tell people, I get in your business because medicine is not just, I feel this, so this is what's going on, and that's it. I'm like, it's so multifaceted. Hey, you taking care of your mom and being her caretaker right now is totally affecting your sleep, which is affecting your mood, which is now affecting your weight. So yes, you came in because you wanted to lose 10 pounds, but let's dig down. Oh, we found the issue. And that is amazing to me because that's whenever progress gets made. Because if we keep treating these symptoms and putting band-aids everywhere, we're never actually going to get anywhere. And so I'm actually seeing a lot more progress with my patients. We're seeing results. They're loving it with the time. And then also, I get to be a little bit more old school and even do things like house calls. And that's close to my heart as well. I'm a mom. And there was a time that all of us, literally, baby came home from the daycare with COVID, flu, and strep. They swabbed her and all of them popped positive. And I was like, that can't be. But it was true because then one of them had flu and strep, and then the other one had COVID and strep, and then I had COVID. And so we all went down at that same time. And I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm fevering and I'm vomiting, how am I supposed to get dressed, get all three of them dressed, get up and go to the doctor and try and this is just ridiculous. And that's where that was born from. I was like, I would love to just be able to go to someone's house and sit down, swab them all, get all the prescriptions taken care of. And that can just free up someone's world completely. My last house call, the mom didn't have to take PTO. I'm not going to out her, but she could continue being on her remote working and continue to do what she needed to do. And I was like, that is quality of life for my patients that you can't honestly buy. That she doesn't have to then ask for time off, take an hour to go to the office, to then come back. She was able to continue to make a living and support her family. And I was able to take care of her and her child and get them healthy without a huge disruption in their life. And I was like, I'm happy to do that. And so the quality of care and also my joy, like the excitement for care, has completely skyrocketed. I love it again, to where I wake up and I'm like, yes, like who's on the schedule today? Versus honestly, in the fee for service, you're getting to the point where you're like, who's going to not show up? Can we pull some of this down? And you start having dread whenever you have a full / double booked or triple booked schedule. And so it's been fun to have that ability to just enjoy what I've trained so hard for at this time.
Incredible. And I just keep saying in the back of my head, it's because you're the gold standard. It's because you're the gold standard. It's so awesome how it fits so well for what you are delivering to your community. Let me ask you this, because clearly your panel is varied, even within the people who have joined so far. How do people get around, why would I pay another fee to see a doctor? How do your patients get around that barrier that a lot of patients experience when they're doing a meet and greet for a DPC?
Yes, the biggest thing for me is, one, I usually sit down and really talk to the prospective member about where are your values? I was like, you have all right to use whatever healthcare program that you have to get that care. But if you're looking for something different and you are really wanting to do a change, that it is worth it. And to be completely blunt, I have definitely I go, how much is your cell phone a month? Okay. So your cell phone is worth more than your health and your health care and the person that you're entrusting your health care to. I'm like, if that is the case, then we are not a good fit if that's where we are. But if you can see the value of having a person who is on your team, who is in the boat with you, rowing with you, an advocate and a partner in your healthcare, then I'm your person. And I am happy to hop in that boat with you. And we're going to start rowing together, because that is where we make drastic change in someone's life.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Walker, for sharing your story today.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of My DPC Story, highlighting the physician experience in the world of direct primary care. I hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. If you want to dive deeper into the direct primary care movement, consider joining our My DPC Story Patreon community. Here, you'll have access to exclusive content, including more interview topics and much more. Don't forget to subscribe to My DPC Story on your podcast feed and follow us on social media as well. If you're able, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave us a review. It helps others to find the podcast. Until next time, stay informed, stay healthy, and keep advocating for DPC. Read more about DPC news on the daily at dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Conception.